The sun was setting over the horizon, casting an eerie orange glow across the sky as the ferry slowly made its way towards the island. It was a small, secluded island located far from the mainland, and it was said to be home to an old mental hospital for elderly patients. The hospital had been closed for years, and the island had been abandoned ever since. A group of young filmmakers had come to the island to shoot a documentary about the history of the hospital. They had heard rumors about strange happenings on the island, and they were excited to investigate and capture it all on camera. As they stepped off the ferry and onto the island, they were greeted by an unsettling silence. The only sound they could hear was the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. The hospital was located on the other side of the island, so they set off on foot, armed with their cameras and curiosity. The hospital was an old, dilapidated building that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The windows were broken, and the doors hung off their hinges. Inside, the halls were dark and musty, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. As they made their way through the hospital, they began to notice something strange. The patients' rooms were all empty, but there were signs of recent activity. Beds were unmade, and the walls were covered in strange markings. Suddenly, they heard a noise coming from down the hall. It was a faint shuffling sound, like someone was dragging their feet along the ground. They followed the noise, their cameras at the ready, and what they found was beyond their worst nightmares. The patients had returned, but they were not the same harmless elderly people they had once been. They were now twisted, violent, and bloodthirsty. They had somehow broken free from their restraints and had started to hunt down anyone who entered their domain. The young filmmakers were trapped in the hospital, with no way out. They tried to barricade themselves in a room, but the patients soon broke through the door. The filmmakers fought back with whatever they could find, but they were no match for the deranged patients. As the night wore on, the island was consumed by screams, the sounds of fighting, and the sickening crunch of bones. The young filmmakers were picked off one by one, their screams echoing through the halls of the hospital. By morning, there was no one left. The hospital was once again silent, the only sounds coming from the waves crashing against the shore. The island remained abandoned, a place of horror that would forever be haunted by the ghosts of the past. Years had passed since the massacre on the island, and it had become a place of legend and superstition. No one dared to set foot on the island, and the hospital had become a place of fear and dread. But one day, a group of urban explorers decided to break the taboo and visit the island. They were thrill seekers who were looking for a new adventure, and the rumors of the haunted hospital had intrigued them. As they arrived on the island, they could feel the weight of the past bearing down on them. The hospital was still standing, a grim reminder of the horrors that had occurred there. As they explored the hospital, they found evidence of the massacre that had taken place. Bloodstains still adorned the walls, and the furniture was overturned and broken. They found patient files and documents that detailed the neglect and abuse suffered by the patients at the hands of the hospital staff. As they delved deeper into the hospital, they began to feel a sense of unease. It was as if something was watching them, lurking in the shadows. Suddenly, they heard a noise, like the sound of shuffling feet. They followed the noise and found themselves face to face with the patients. But these patients were not old and frail. They were young and healthy, with a look of madness in their eyes. They had taken up residence in the abandoned hospital, using it as a hideout from the rest of the world. The urban explorers tried to run, but the patients were too fast. They were hunted down, one by one, and dragged back to the hospital to suffer the same fate as those who had come before them. The island remained deserted once again, a place of darkness and horror. The ghosts of the past still lingered, waiting to claim their next victims. And so the legend of the haunted hospital on the island lived on, a warning to all those who dared to seek out the unknown. Years had turned into decades, and the island had become a forgotten relic of the past. The hospital had crumbled into ruins, and the island had been reclaimed by nature. But on a dark and stormy night, a group of thrill-seekers found themselves stranded on the island. They had been out on a boat when the storm hit, and they were forced to seek refuge on the island until it passed. As they huddled together in the ruins of the hospital, they heard strange noises coming from outside. It was the sound of footsteps, slow and shuffling, like someone was dragging their feet along the ground. Suddenly, the patients appeared, but they were not the same twisted, violent creatures they had once been. They were now old and feeble, with haunted looks in their eyes. The patients explained that they had been left on the island, forgotten by the world. They had survived by hunting and scavenging, but they had grown tired of their existence. They had spent their lives haunted by the memories of the past, and they wanted to be free of their pain. The thrill-seekers listened to their story and felt a sense of compassion for the patients. They helped them to leave the island, and they made sure that they were taken care of and given a proper home. As the group left the island behind, they knew that they had witnessed something extraordinary. They had witnessed the power of compassion and the importance of remembering the past. The island remained deserted, but the patient's legacy lived on. They had left behind a message of hope and redemption, a reminder that even in the darkest of places, there is still a chance for light to shine through.